This empire was too powerful to fall. It ruled millions, controlled entire continents. Nothing could stop it. And then, almost overnight, it collapsed. No warning, no mercy. So what? Destroyed an empire that seemed invincible. At its peak, this empire controlled more land, more people, and more power than anything the world had ever seen. Its armies were unstoppable, its leaders untouchable. For centuries, it stood as the center of the world itself. But beneath the surface, something was changing. Something no one could see. And when it finally revealed itself, it didn't just weaken the empire, it erased it. Long before its fall, this empire rose from almost nothing. It didn't begin as a superpower. It began as a small, determined force, surrounded by enemies, forced to adapt, to survive, to evolve. And that struggle shaped it into something different, something stronger. While other nations relied on numbers, this empire relied on discipline. While others fought for survival, it fought for dominance. Its leaders were strategic, patient, calculating. They didn't just win battles. They built systems that allowed them to control vast territories without losing order. Roads connected distant lands. Communication moved faster than ever before. Laws were enforced with precision, and slowly, what started as a small power began to expand beyond anything imaginable. One victory led to another. One region became 10. 10 became an entire world under its control. At its peak, this empire didn't just influence the world, it defined it. Trade, culture, language, everything flowed through it. Its capital became the center of civilization itself. A place where wealth, knowledge, and power collided. Massive structures rose from the ground. Temples, palaces, monuments, each one designed to send a message. This empire is eternal. This empire cannot fall. And for a long time, that belief felt real. Because no matter what happened, the empire always adapted. It always recovered. It always came back stronger. But that's the illusion of power. The stronger something appears, the harder it becomes to see the cracks forming underneath. And in this empire, those cracks had already begun. From the outside, nothing had changed. The empire was still vast, still powerful, still feared. But inside, a different story was unfolding. The systems that once made it strong were beginning to fail. Leadership, once disciplined and strategic, became unstable. Power shifted hands more frequently. Decisions were no longer made for the future, but for short-term control. Corruption didn't appear suddenly. It spread slowly, quietly, hidden behind success. Officials began to abuse their positions. Resources were misused. Wealth stopped flowing through the empire and started collecting in the hands of a few. The gap between the powerful and the powerless widened, and with it, trust began to disappear. The army, once the empire's greatest strength, began to change as well. Loyalty weakened, discipline faded. Soldiers were no longer fighting for something they believed in. They were fighting because they had to. And that difference changes everything. But the most dangerous shift wasn't visible. It was psychological. The people slowly stopped believing in the empire's future. The idea of the empire, the identity that once united millions, started to fade. And when that happens, something breaks that cannot be repaired. Because empires are not held together by walls, or armies, or wealth. They are held together by belief. And once that belief is gone, everything else begins to collapse with it. The collapse didn't begin with a single event. There was no warning, no dramatic announcement, no moment that clearly marked the beginning of the end. Instead, it unfolded slowly, almost quietly. At first, it was small, a lost border, a failed campaign, a region that no longer responded to control. But those small failures started to connect, and once they did, the system began to break. Communication slowed, trade routes became unsafe, supplies stopped reaching the places that needed them, and the empire began to lose control of itself. Enemies, once afraid to act, saw an opportunity, and they took it. Attacks increased, pressure grew, and for the first time, the empire couldn't respond effectively. Not because it lacked power, but because it lacked unity. Cities began to fall, not with massive battles, but with resistance that felt weak, disconnected, as if no one was truly fighting anymore. And then, something strange happened. The empire didn't explode into chaos. It didn't end in one final dramatic collapse. It simply faded. Structures remained, land remained, but the power, the identity, the empire itself was gone, as if it had already ended, long before the world noticed. For years, people searched for a simple answer, a single cause, a clear explanation. But the truth is more complex. This empire wasn't destroyed in a moment. It wasn't defeated by one enemy. It didn't fall because of one mistake. It fell because of everything. Every small weakness, every ignored problem, every moment where the system chose comfort over correction. It all added up. Slowly, quietly, until the collapse became unavoidable. And that's what makes this story so dangerous. Because it's not just about the past, it's a pattern, one that has repeated itself throughout history, again and again and again. Powerful systems rising, dominating, and then falling. Not because they were attacked, but because they stopped being what made them strong in the first place. And maybe the most unsettling part is this: if it happened before, it can happen again. Not in the same way, but for the same reasons. And by the time it becomes visible, it's already too late. In the end, even the most powerful empire in history couldn't escape its fate, not because it was weak, but because something deeper was already breaking it from within. And maybe that same force still exists today, waiting